So I switched to the iPhone 15 Plus, and I really don't have a desire to go back now. You might be wondering why I might have switched, and the reason why I switched, first of all, is because I was having an issue with my 15 Pro Max's eSIM, which has actually already been resolved, but in the meantime, I switched over to the 15 Plus, and I really haven't felt a need to go back, and that's why I want to share all the discoveries I've found so far. Now, I did do a similar video on the Mornick Eckerman channel. You could check that out. But this one, I want to dive a little bit deeper. And the first thing I want to talk about is the weight. The weight of this phone is just phenomenal. It's not something to really go crazy about. But at the same time, after the 11 Pro Max, the 12 Pro Max, the 13 Pro Max, the 14 Pro Max, and now the 15 Pro Max, 5 model years, they all just have too much weight by comparison to these lighter 14 and 15 Plus models. But because Apple took the 14 Plus, which I wasn't super impressed with, made the back more clean, this almost feels like a Pro. And I really do like the matte black texture. So it literally feels like I'm using just a more comfortable, ergonomic version of the iPhone 15 Pro Max. So I think it's super underrated in the way it feels. A lot of people don't really care too much to talk about this phone on reviews, but it's one of the best feeling phones out there in terms of the size to weight ratio. It's really that good. So I really think that's one of the main reasons why I switched over here. Now, the second one is going to be the actual performance of the phone. So the phone performs like an absolute boss. It doesn't matter what you're doing on the device. It has the Apple A16 Bionic chipset, which really means that you have the iPhone 14 Pro Max chip inside of here. So you have a Max chip that is just from last year, and that just gives you a really good CPU speed. Not that the calculator is going to mean much, but even when you're playing games and things of that sort, which I don't play too many, it definitely does do very well. So for that reason, the iPhone 15 Pro Max definitely, or the 15, I just called it the 15 Pro Max, the iPhone 15 Plus has been rock solid. If we run some benchmarks, it'll still benchmark better than a lot of Android devices in this area. I'm actually planning to compare this in speed against a couple other faster phones in this, just to see how I can drive that point home, or if it can even stack up to phones that are a little bit more quote unquote powerful, if you will. So the lack of ProMotion display on here might be a concern for some people. And what I want to say is that that lack of ProMotion didn't really bother me too much, if I'm being quite honest with you. Now, I know you might be thinking, well, everyone else says the ProMotion is amazing, and it is amazing. That's not something I disagree with. So you might be wondering, well, why are you the only YouTuber saying that it's fine? Well, I'm not, because if you look, there's a lot of videos of people talking about how the 15 Plus has been pretty darn good. What I want to say here for me is that, you've been using 60 hertz for a long time before this, so it doesn't really feel that bad. But the way iOS works with this, it doesn't bother me. I just don't know another way to put it. It just simply does not bother me. Does it bother me that this price of this phone is over $1,000 for that? Yes. So I do think that if you can do a trade and knock the price down, that's a much better deal. Or if you can just wait it out a little bit till this comes down, that's also a better deal. That's the only thing that bothers me, is the price about it. But it's not an excuse. They should still go to 90 hertz because the competition does it, or at least 120 hertz on the next one. But for now, it really just doesn't bother me because the phone works that well. Like, iOS is smooth, it's efficient, it's consistent, and everything that it does, it really just does very well. So I'm not really too concerned with this. And when it comes to performance, it just does a good job at everything. I will say too that this is kind of a weird point, but sometimes I want to not be on my phone too much, and I find that because it's not 120 hertz, I'm not as glued to the screen. Now on the iPhone 15 Pro Max, because it's so smooth, I just want to use it all the time. It's just butter to the eyes. I just want to use this phone all the time. I want to play games. I want to scroll things. I just like the smooth look of it so much on the 15 Pro Max that I actually want to use it more. So if you're trying to reduce distraction, having a 120 hertz is not going to help that one bit, that's for sure. Because why would you not want to use a phone that feels so buttery, silky smooth like the iPhone 15 Pro Max? So it's kind of a pro to this phone. If you just want to use it as a tool and don't want to be overly distracted or playing around with it, having a smoother display just makes you want to play around with it more. That's just how I felt about it in that sense. Now, I will tell you another thing that I learned about this is that the phone itself has a really, really good camera. And so even though the phone doesn't really need, it doesn't have a ultra zoom, and that's not like, I'm not saying it's great that it doesn't have that. A lot of competition does. At least you can crop in on the main sensor for a 2x zoom, which really gives me a pretty good photo. Also, the ultra wide is strong, and I feel like this is the best iteration of the base model camera yet, because most people only need like a 2x zoom and then a 10x digital. They don't need more than this. And so for base model users or people, or most people who, using an iPhone, most people do not need more zoom than this. I find that we're getting to the point now with this phone here, especially with the 15 iteration, that you really don't need more than this unless you are actually doing pro level stuff. If you're not doing pro level stuff, you seriously need to consider a 15 Plus or 15. Save yourself some money, because these cameras, they can still do basically the same video. They can still do basically the same photo. They basically have similar cameras until you get to the, RAW and stuff like that. So they can be used in a pro way if you want. But definitely, these cameras here have been phenomenal. Also on the front facing camera, it's also very good as well. You have that f-stop, and the Smart HDR thing is really good as well. It just does a good job with that. So this camera here has been seriously good enough that I really haven't thought about much about my iPhone 15 Pro Max. Seriously haven't. Now in the area of software, we have iOS 17.1.2. 17.3 should be here soon. They're still in the beta phases of that, but I gotta say that, I really don't like how iOS doesn't have this back gesture over here. That's just a little nitpick, but that's for all iOS. The software is basically the same. You do have same features essentially, except for the raw stuff. You have the same app library here. You have the same widget support here, the same access to the same ecosystem. So when you are using this stuff, it kind of just feels like you're using the same product as the iPhone 15 Pro Max. And so for that reason, I think it's a good value to save yourself some money and get yourself this one right here. Why wouldn't you do that? I mean, it's just pretty much common sense. If you don't need the extra, you can still get this big iPhone for cheaper and have essentially the same experience with a similar amount of software support. So that's how I feel about it. And because of that, if you have essentially the same software experience, I'm not going to really crave going back to something that's basically the same. Not that I'm not going to. I'm eventually going to go back to my 15 Pro Max, but it hasn't really made me think about it because it's literally the same apps, literally the same experience. The next area is the battery life. The battery life on here, while I can't say it's better than the 15 Pro Max, it's slightly less. It's very, very good. So 15 Pro Max already impressed me, going a day and a half. This one goes about a day and a quarter. And if you are a light user, both 15 Pro Max and this can go 2 days. So you really have to decide if you want better battery life. You'll want to go to the bigger iPhones this year because they are seriously good. I also talked about this before, but I like how with the 15 Plus, because it's 60 Hertz, if you go low power mode, you don't really have a jarring difference. You go low power mode on the 15 Pro Max, you go from the Pro Motion to 60 Hertz. So it kind of just stays in line, and it allows you to use low power mode without changing the experience so much, and then getting much better battery life. And it also doesn't really affect its usage too much. So I kind of had low power mode on quite a bit. So definitely strong battery life here on the iPhone 15 Plus. It's one of those phones where I really don't think about the battery all that much at all. It kind of reminds me of an iPad where I just use it, leave it alone, use it, and I just don't even think about it. I can honestly turn off the percentage if I wanted to, because I'm just not worried about it draining throughout the day. Next one is the Dynamic Island. So the Dynamic Island, while has definitely got more advanced than just doing things like timers, that's still a useful feature to this day. You can see your AirPods up there. You can see phone calls up there. You can see Uber Eats and things like that. Lyft rides expand as well. So the developers are getting on board with Dynamic Island, and it's becoming a little bit more useful. And it's a real big separator for this 15 Plus, making it feel more modern. than the 14 Plus, which I will compare to that phone soon. I haven't compared those yet, so stay tuned for that. But because it has dynamic island, it just feels like a lighter version of the iPhone 15 Pro Max. So do keep that in mind. It's definitely a solid addition here for the iPhone 15 Plus. In terms of the actual display though, we are looking at a Super Retina XDR panel, and the actual colors are just like other iPhones, natural, not overly vibrant, but also don't really hurt my eyes too much, especially if I turn on accessibility, reduce white point at nighttime, and I go ahead and lower the brightness a little bit. But this one, I don't know, for some reason they claim it has the same brightness. It doesn't look as bright as the 15 Pro Max to me, especially, you know, during the day when I'm cranking it up. It just, even though it's kind of listed the same, it doesn't really look the same to me. So I don't know what's up with that, but that's what I experienced. All in all though, it's still a really bright display. I don't really see a major issue with it. And it's actually still brighter than some Android phones. Like this looks to me a little brighter than the Pixel 8 Pro for some reason. And even brighter than some OnePlus phones. So take it for what you will. Even though it's 60 Hertz, it seems brighter. And then over here, you'll see you have night shift, dark mode. And yeah, so it's a standard iPhone display with the dynamic island, but it's a nice wide panel. So because of this width, it makes it easier to type. It makes it easier to see more content on the screen. So just like the 15 Pro Max, you get a spacious experience right here. Although I'm still looking forward to seeing like a 6.9-inch Ultra iPhone. This is still pretty solid for the time being. And so the audio quality was also pretty much similar to the 15 Pro Max, but not quite there, maybe a decibel or two difference. Phone call quality was solid through these speakers. I like how it stayed so clean here on the edges with the matte black, and other color options would be similar. These newer iPhone 15 Pluses really don't have a fingerprint issue. I still keep them in a case, very thin case. I'll leave that link down below because I don't really like having a case on period, but I need some kind of protection. But at the end of the day, wrapping it up here, the iPhone 15 Plus, I'm just kind of shocked how polished and refined the user experience is for this non-Pro iPhone here. I honestly think most people don't need more iPhone than this. And as a matter of fact, having this Plus version here of this iPhone actually is kind of more than most people need because it's not a smaller iPhone. So if you want a big standard iPhone, it kind of feels like it actually feels like a Plus now. It doesn't really feel like just a regular big iPhone. They're adding enough that this is nearly a Pro phone with a couple of tweaks. This would be nearly a Pro experience. 120 Hertz display would have took this to the next level. It really would have. But I'm still shocked, and I still enjoyed it during this switch. And while I plan to switch back soon to the 15 Pro Max for my iPhone SIM, I gotta say I'm really, really impressed with this, and I think this is easily the best Plus phone ever, obviously. And it's one of the best big phones ever just because really good software, really lightweight, really good battery life, solid cameras. The thing is just a pretty amazing product, even if it's not the most popular, so pretty underrated. Thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you haven't already. Nick here. Be sure to be well. I will catch you all in the next episode. And if you have any questions, comments, leave them down below in the comment section. Be sure to be well, and peace.